Good Sunday, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show on this Sunday, the 3rd of October, 2021. Thank you for tuning in. Now, have you guys ever seen the big redwood trees? When they first come over here to America, they had redwood trees, and I'm telling you, the stump was like 20 feet across from one side of it to the other, and an enormous tree went up to, reached up to the sky. It was so big. You know, they cut those big redwood trees down. And the first way they cut a tree down is they make what's called a notch. And then they start making back cuts on the other side of the stump to bring the tree down. Now, at a certain point, when the tree is about 3/4 cut, you start hearing these crack sounds come from inside the stump on a huge tree like that. They're like little snapping sounds. Snap, snap, pop, pop sounds. At that point, there's no turning back anymore. But because the tree is so enormous, sometimes it'll sit there making those little popping sounds inside the stump for 5 minutes or more before the actual top of the tree starts to actually move. On a really big tree, I'm talking about, a huge, like a redwood. Now, then when it does start to fall, it takes a long time before it actually comes down and hits the ground. It gains speed and momentum. It hits the ground with an enormous thud, and all the ground actually shakes. Now, you guys are probably wondering where I'm going with this. I'm using this as an analogy. I am just now, the back cut was made, COVID made the back cut in the system. Like the back cut you make in a tree, the notch, the big notch. But the tree was still solid, and that's the way a tree is when you have just a notch put in it. You could put a notch in a tree if you're bringing a tree down. You could leave it for a few days with that notch in it. It ain't going to go nowhere. There's still a lot of strength holding the tree. It's a back cut. When you cut the other side, that's when the tree starts to really lose its strength. Well, COVID made a notch in our system, an enormous notch. But the central banks came in, and they dumped in tremendous amounts of liquidity, and they didn't fix that notch. That notch is, you see it. You guys go out on the street. I don't care if you're in the United Kingdom or if you're in America. You see all these little businesses and stuff that were once open now. They've closed their doors. Mom and pop businesses. They just couldn't manage through the years. This COVID thing's been hanging around over our heads like a black cloud. Over all of our businesses and things. They just couldn't manage to stay in business through that long duration. So now they've went out of business. So the notch hasn't been repaired in the structure of the system itself. And now I hear these snapping sounds. So that's the snapping sounds that I'm hearing are, it's game over because the back cut. We've went through the back cut process now over the last year or so, and central banks have been cutting back. This is the back cut. The central banks are now not stimulating anymore. This is like the back cut. Now I hear the snaps coming out of the stump, and I know it's just a matter of time now at this point for either a partial shutdown and this is a worldwide thing. This isn't just one country. When I'm speaking right now, my audience reaches the whole world. Admitted, most of my viewers come from North America, but I have worldwide viewers. Australia. Hello out there in Australia. Hi, guys. United Kingdom. Hello, United Kingdom. Hi, guys. Welcome to the show. But they're all over the world. You know? And so I'm talking about a worldwide phenomenon here. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what are these snapping sounds that I hear within the system that are the final part of the tree coming down. Because when you're a woodsman and you hear the stump starting to making those snapping sounds, tree's not coming down right away, but it's starting to move. And the snapping sounds get louder and more of them, quicker and faster. The tree's starting to move, and that's what I'm hearing, the snapping sounds. So that's what we're going to look at. We're going to open up the charts right here. We're going to take a look at some of these snapping sounds. Now, the first article says a butterfly has flapped its wings. Chaos series also associated with something along the lines of a butterfly flapping its wings. Tokyo leads the storm in Manhattan. Uh, this article, what this narrator here, it's this person that wrote this article is pointing out. Well, I'm going to get to the point. What this article's about is he's seeing it. He's talking about Afghanistan here. He's talking about energy problems in Europe and in China. He's talking about jobs, the confusion about the number of unfilled jobs. Uh, he's talking about the transitory inflation, which is not really transitory at all. He's talking about the central banks here and uh, how they are all poised right now to be less accommodative than they were. And it says this is happening across the globe, and I'll highlight that. China real estate and Evergrande, he says, might be the Mothra. In other words, the monster that's flapped its wings. In other words, in chaos theory, patterns only emerge after time, and only once those patterns emerge can we see them for what they really were. I think we have had several critical events in the moments that will play out in the coming weeks, and most seem to have been bad. He says, they do reinforce my longer term view that we will uh, develop a domestic manufacturing base in the coming years. Uh, that's way out there. And yeah, I agree. United States is going to redevelop a manufacturing base, but we're going to go through this massive crisis first, which is, I believe it's going to be a worldwide partial system shutdown, is what we're going to be looking at. But that's big. That's huge. I want to get into why it's huge here. We're going to look at more reasons why I hear this tree stump cracking. What is this? Some ad? German power plants are halted after they run out of coal. And look at the German electricity price. You see what's happening here? It's going straight up to the moon. And they're running out of coal. What's this one? Running out of space, United Kingdom farmers to cull 120,000 pigs amid a labor shortage at the slaughterhouse. So what are they going to do? Waste 120,000 pigs? You know? This is our food supply for next year. And they're just basically going to slaughter it. What are they going to do? Bury it in the landfill? Probably. This is our food supply for next year. When I talk about food supply, Europe's rising energy prices will force factory closures. Now, I had another article here. I don't know what's happened to it, but it's about the Netherlands. The big, enormous greenhouses they have all across the Netherlands produce food for Europe. They're shutting down. Right now, it's hard to tell the exact numbers, but it looks like they're only running at about 60% production. Why that's enormous is second to the United States is in agricultural food production. You know, things like, we're talking about things like carrots and lettuce and onions and all these foods, you know. Second only to the United States is the Netherlands. They produce a tremendous amount of food for Europe. With these energy prices going up and everything, plus we got China shutting down because basically the world is starting to shut down here and there. It seems like energy might be the leading indicator. And all of these things I see them as a sign of snapping in the stump of the system, you know. So COVID was like the notch in the big stump, and now the back cut is the central banks are cutting back, and now we got an energy squeeze going on worldwide. And at the same time, places where they ship products and things, the enormous cost for shipping is going way up, you know? So what does this mean? What does it all mean? I'm going to start to link it now together for you guys. And it's like a domino effect. One thing leads to another thing. What leads to another thing? Well, it's going to lead to food prices going up massively high. This is what it's going to lead to. The food's still going to be there in the stores, but they're going to jack the price up so high, you're going to think that you're going into a diamond store and you're buying diamonds. Instead, you're just buying walnuts or whatever, you know. It's going to be like you're buying diamonds, the price. So normally in a family, what you have is you have a certain set aside amount that people pay for food. And generally, that's only a small amount of their income. That's the way it's been up till now. A smaller percentage of their income. Now, with poor people, it represents a larger percentage of their income. But for most people, it represents a percentage of your income. And the rest of your money goes to things like paying the bills, you know, like paying for your electricity bill, paying for your water bill, paying for your rent, maybe a mortgage, you know, paying maybe for your car lease, you know, and things like that. And your food represents a certain percentage of that bill. Well, if those food prices suddenly double, triple, quadruple, suddenly that part of your income takes more. It takes into the other parts of your income, and you have to make these decisions, you know. Do I eat this month, or do I pay for my car? Do I eat this month, or do I pay for my house? Or do I pay for my electricity, or do I pay for my phone bill? What happens then is when people start to go hungry, and they've done studies on this before, you guys. You know that they've done studies on this. People start to go hungry because food prices go too high. A desperation, fear, and desperation starts to enter in amongst the people at the plight of their situation, where they see food prices continuing to go higher, and they say, how are we going to feed our kids? You know, and as fear and desperation starts to go through the population, and that fear is what creates anger. Remember that. Almost 100% of the time, you're going to find that fear will transform into anger. The two emotions actually go together, fear and anger, you know? And that fear of food insecurity, that fear of not being able to have something to eat and actually feeling the gnawing ache of a stomach that's empty, can transform itself into anger amongst the people. And then the anger looks for an outlet. It looks for a reason. Why is this happening to us? We've lived all of our lives, and we've been able to afford to go to a restaurant and have steak. Now, all of a sudden, we can't even afford a can of beans. What in the heck's happening? So the next stage in all of this is something called social unrest. That, like these are the dominoes. The next stage is social unrest. And at the first stages of social unrest, it's groups of people that have the same mindset, but they might have different philosophies, they might have different religious backgrounds, they might have different, gosh only knows, but they're not the same. They're like one group over here, one group over there, one group over there. But they're groups, you know, and they're upset about one thing or another thing because of the situation that's happening to them, and the main driver behind them is that they're being squeezed by the system because the system is failing. It's failing them. Their leaders are failing them. This is a common ground between all of these different groups. When it grows big enough, the social unrest, these groups form together into a unanimous, like, almost like if you were to observe a beehive, and if you were to see small groups of bees forming together around a one large collective hive mentality, ultimately. And so what this does in turn, like say one thing leads to another, it leads to the reformation, very rapid reformation of a new social order, a new system of governance. Because the people will blame the old system and the structure of that old system for having caused all of the problems that they went through. So basically it's like this. It doesn't matter in the people's eyes if a person is directly responsible for the situation that happens. They're going to uh, basically group the people together that they consider to be the problem themselves. In other words, they're going to say, well, these guys over here are the problem. They're the reason why we're going hungry. They're going to have to find something or someone to blame. I can see a whole group of people out there, I'm not going to name them, who right now are in danger, as these dominoes fall, of being thrown under the bus, basically, in this situation. I can see that as this giant, enormous redwood falls, as it gathers speed and it starts to come down, really come down, and the enormous suffering it generates in the world, leading to situations where the world evolves so quickly into a new paradigm. And then after the redwood falls, after the system falls, the world is going to be left to pick up the mess. And this is going to take a long time to restructure. I truly believe that the world is going to be restructured in a much better way after this is over. But it's probably going to take 10 to 20 years for the world to recover to the point where we can almost say things were back to a new normal, a really new normal where the world is actually a calm place again. We're going through a storm right now, and I think the culmination of this storm is when the stump hits the ground. And what we're going to be looking at is probably about 4 months where things are going to be really at the worst part of this. So the worst, even though this crisis is probably going to extend out over a 30-year period, an awful lot of those years are going to be restructuring and the world getting back to normal again. Each year is going to be better. Like probably all the way through the 20, the rest of, like after 2025 to 2030, and probably all the way through the 2030s and all the way through the 2040s. This restructuring will go on. Each year things will get a little bit better, a little bit more orderly, a little bit more, society will get a new structure, and new technologies are going to be emerging, and we're going to start to reap the benefits more of technology rather than this system that we have right now, because it's so, the way it's been put together, the whole thing has been put together like, kind of like people just come along, they'll come from Europe or whatever, and they say, hey, this land is mine, and they plant a flag on it, and then people start to build roads. They build roads on the old Indian trails and everything else, and the system is all structured just by circumstance. Same way they'll like they'll come in and they'll see a big field, and they'll see a big brook running through the middle of the field, and we'll say we're going to call this Brookfield. You know, and then it all just happens. There's no real thought behind it. The whole system has been structured together that way, every inch of it around the world. Not a real lot of thought put into it. But it's growing into this giant, enormous system that functions. It's a wonder it even functions to begin with, but it does function pretty well, actually, or did function pretty well before COVID. The thing about it is, considering how haphazardly it was put together, the way I see them structuring this new system that they're going to create, and it's probably going to take 20 or 30 years to structure it and build it out, is with more thought put into it. And the reason why more thought's going to be put into it is because we created the old system using our brains. What's going to happen here is machine learning and machine intelligence. AI is probably going to be directly responsible for structuring this new system, because we're already there, guys. We might as well face facts. They already have AI, and it's advancing at a rate of exponential growth. The AI is in the world. It's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger, and in the end, humanity is going to rely upon it for everything, including structuring the system that they're going to put together, probably in the late 2020s, into the 2030s, and into the 2040s, while they're restructuring this. This is going to be an enormous crash. And there's going to be about a 4-month period there where the world is going to be at the worst part of this. And I see chaos during that 4-month period. Disorder. An awful lot of screaming and yelling, and an awful lot of chaos in the world. And it's going to be a very hard, very difficult 4 months. And that's going to be probably the worst part, is when everything scrambles into disorder around the world, here and there and everywhere, while the core of the system's probably going to stay up and running during this time. And they're going to keep that running by using the financial system. By what we've seen already, the central banks are just going to be pumping money out like it's going out of style, to try to keep the core part of the system up and running through this. And then they're going to have some sort of a reset. I can't tell you guys how this is all going to play out, because there's so many variables, but I can see it coming. In fact, I've saw it coming for the last 5 or 6 years. And when I first saw this coming, this was like so far away, almost nobody else could see it coming. But some of the first shows I done on here was pointing out how vulnerable the system is because of the way we are structuring it with computers. I pointed out how we were going all hog into these computer systems everywhere, and the system all runs on this now. And if the electricity goes out, the computers basically don't work, so the system don't work. What kind of a nutty thing is that to do? I mean, going back to the 1800s, if they were to have some sort of an event that knocked out all the electricity, they wouldn't even know it's out. In fact, in the United States, they had an event, called the Carrington event. And the only reason that we even know it happened is because it affected the telegraph lines, which were part of the only electrical grid structure in the world. Was telegraph lines. Houses didn't have any electricity. They had gas lamps. But even though those things are antiquated, things like gas lamps in your house, still, it creates a structure of a system that's far more self-reliant and much more capable of functioning after a disaster. Whether it be a man-made disaster or be a disaster caused by nature. If you don't have electricity, it's much easier for you to function in a disaster. If you have electricity, well, the power goes out. Everything that you normally use goes out. Your communications is then gone. But if you've got your communications set up so it doesn't run on electricity, for crying out loud, in the ancient world, they used to use something called a passenger pigeon for rapid communication. They could move a message from one place to another very rapidly, and this was before the telegraph. But the telegraph, again, relies upon electricity. Our modern world, we've made ourselves too dependent upon so many different things that we have to have all of those things met, all of those qualifications met for our world to run. And this is these dependencies, interdependencies, is what makes us vulnerable as a society, right down to a personal level. And yeah, now we're dealing with failures. Just starting. But the whole system could collapse into one enormous failure. And that's exactly what it's going to do. So you're saying, Glenn, when do you think this collapse is going to happen? You guys probably been waiting for this. By gosh, it sure does look like it's setting up for 2022 and 2023. And I'm thinking to myself, that we're going to get that 4-month period that's going to be really, 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 really nasty. A 4-month long period, I'm thinking. Maybe it might last 6 months. Worldwide. You're not going to be able to escape it because I think it's going to be worldwide. And it's like a birth pain, of a new of something new emerging and something old dying. And what it's going to show is it's going to show the world these weaknesses in the structure of the system that I've been preaching about for like 5 or 6 years and I've been saying we need to have redundant systems in place for emergencies. They don't have anything. If you get a gas pipeline break or something, there's no redundant system in place. The gas stations all just go empty. And then that affects the people directly. This is nutty. But no other way of putting it, it's nutty. The way the system is run is nuts. It's stupid. But there it is. And now we're heading headfirst into something very black and bleak because our money is corrupted. There's no way out of that. They print, inflation goes up. If they stop printing, the system deflates. And either way, it goes crazy in the end. And it's not going to stay where it is right now. It's on the move. It looks to me like it's going to go inflation. But it could deflate in a moment. The whole thing could deflate. And deflation is so much faster. It can all happen in a day, guys. The system could deflate in a day and freeze. The next day it'd be frozen. The system would be frozen, locked up. They can use money to unlock it. But it would take time. They would have to sort it out. They'd have to figure out where the bankruptcy started and trace it, almost like you trace a trail. You follow the trail to the next company that went bankrupt, who caused the next company to go bankrupt, which caused the next company to go bankrupt, and that caused all these margin calls to go out, and then the next company went, and they'd have to trace that trail, and then they would have to make all those companies whole again within the system. Something like that. Which would maybe take days or weeks. Meanwhile, the system would be locked. Because basically all they're running is a stupid ledger out there. When you go out to buy something, and you move money, and say you've got a debit card from your bank, and all they're doing is changing the ledger. Say you purchase something that costs $300. They just subtract 300 from your account, and they add that to the ledger of whatever you purchased. It's just moving money. It's just moving digits on a ledger. That's all it is. It's not. That money's not real. The only real tangible money is the money that they've taken the effort and time to print and actually produce, so that you can actually hold in your hand, like your change. It's in your purse, or your dollar bills or your bills. Those are real. All the rest is just fantasy. So anyway, this is what we got going on. It's a crazy world out there. We got to try to survive it. And that's what I wanted to tell you guys this Sunday. That things we're looking at some sort of a massive crisis. I think is coming in 2022 or 2023. I think we're just enough steam left where we're going to kind of cruise into Christmas time. Things aren't good, but Moving into next year, by gosh, things look awful bleak for this thing to start emerging extremely quickly. I might not even be able to stay on the air. I might have to try to use a generator of some sort to try to get these shows out there to you guys. Because the power grid around the world right now is becoming unreliable. In many different countries, you know. And I'm going to try to broadcast to you guys as much as I can for as long as I possibly can. But I might have to, like I'm saying, I might have to use a generator. And in the end, I might not even be able to get fuel for my generator. The kind of times we got, you know. But if I'm in that kind of a mess, I know all of you guys are going to be in that kind of a mess. Thank you guys for listening to my show. Have a great rest of the afternoon, weekend. And I'm hoping we're going to have a great Christmas this year. Really do. Bye-bye, guys.